Well, the TC06 Trail Cam was broken off by something. I think the SD card should be fine, but it was broken off and basically upside down the whole 6 weeks I was gone. Well, I'm not sure exactly when it happened, but because it was upside down, we had Hurricane Ian coming through. It's full of water. You can see the water dripping out of it and the rust in the battery compartment. Lenses have moisture and water in them. There's actually water around the camera lens. Well, I was trying something a little different this time. I was gone for 6 weeks on travel, and in the past, if you watched any of my documentaries about the cats and the raccoons and the bobcats and the coyotes, the trail camera tends to get abused and get easily knocked over. It'll usually just lean back or knock off its case. So this time I came up with the idea of putting a couple of heavy bricks on the back here and then supporting the camera like this with 2 heavy bricks back there.
This is the way I found the camera. I get some compelling footage because my style is to put the trail cameras just an inch off the ground and film at bird and animal eye level. This means I'm going to lose cameras once in a while to get you those good clips. It's worth it, but this Campark TC06 will live to film again.
The good news is the camera didn't bend backwards, but because it was so thoroughly attached on this aluminum post, it looks like something just ripped it off this way and snapped off the 1/4-inch aluminum nut and screw. And you can see the water coming out of the camera because the camera was basically upside down at that point, and the power cord was in there and that. So I mean, upside down trail camera is going to get water in it. And you can see in here, the battery compartment was full of water. Hopefully I'll find out by when I review the SD card. Usually the SD card, you can see the SD card here, the SD card is sopping wet, but usually SD cards, when you dry them out, you see how wet it is. It's been underwater for I'm not sure how long, probably since, well, who knows, we'll see. But I'm pretty sure I'll be able to get data off the SD card even though there's water on the contacts. Just dry it out. So the first thing I'll do is remove the batteries and set the unit out in the hot Florida sun and start the evaporation process and see if some miracle will come back to life. Okay, just to review, I left the Campark TC06 Trail Camera out in the jungle behind the backyard when I left on a long trip up to North Carolina on September 20th, and I returned on October 25th. I took out the SD card, and the SD card, after drying it out just a little bit, worked fine, and I could see what happened. And what actually happened on September 28th and 29th, the rainfall from the outer edges of Hurricane Ian and the passage of Hurricane Ian, after it weakened, it completely flooded the forest back there. It's really a wet, dry forest, so it's typically wet in the summer and dry in the winter, but there's lots of canals and things like that. But in the hurricane season, the whole forest can become flooded. So the camera was literally completely underwater, and then the water gradually receded. And amazingly, it continued to work. And it wasn't until much later, on October 15th, when the camera was actually snapped off by something really big. I had a solar power pack in there. I knew they wouldn't last the whole time I was gone, but remarkably, they lasted until October 15th. And the way I had it set up was that during the night, it would continue to record, but the IR lights wouldn't come on once the battery got really weak. So it did continue to record, but didn't have the video, but had audio of the actual breakage.
This is a story of a trail camera and the wildlife behavior observed around the passage of Ian. First, let me say we got off light from Hurricane Ian around here with sustained tropical storm force winds and flooding rainfall, but nothing like the destructive winds and storm surge experienced on the southwest Florida coast. Ian crossed central Florida on the 29th of September with sustained tropical storm force winds while dropping record rainfall north of the center, exceeding a foot in many areas. At this time late on the evening of September 28th, the forest floor was flooded from rainfall earlier in the day in Ian's outer rain bands. Now the heavy rain on the north side of Ian's center and the higher winds are approaching. Animals wisely take shelter when storms approach, and they'll survive where they can escape rising water. The wind speed is actually very low, just inches above the ground level, and the dense forest understory of saw palmettos really blocks the wind at the ground while the wind howls above at treetop level. On video number 215, recorded at 12:47 a.m. on the 29th, the wind and the rain are starting to pick up as the center of Ian approaches. The next video, number 216, is not recorded until 7:39 p.m., or almost 19 hours later. All is quiet now, and the mother raccoon and her only kid are the first to come out in the open and check things out. So the top of the camera stood about 8 inches total from the sandy surface layer during the time of the highest winds and heaviest rain, and was most surely completely underwater for some period of time, as the water level rose further and then later fell. You can hear that the microphone is still underwater at this time as mother raccoon and her kit slog by. Eventually many of the critters venture out to forage and check out their environment. They are no doubt hungry. It is not surprising that the water-loving marsh rabbits are out in the middle of the water, or that the possums just put their heads down and slog through. But you won't catch the feral cat putting his toes in the water. Late on October 1st, the water has receded and a secondary hazard of floods has arrived, a massive spawn of mosquitoes and other biting critters that follow. Here you can see the old male feral cat trying to fight a few mosquitoes off of the many that swarm him. A pair of armadillos are turning their attention to mating. Birds like the American redstart, northern cardinal, and painted bunting know that the forest floor can provide some good easy meals after floodwaters recede. There is often increased rodent activity as well after a flood, and the tough old feral cat has caught himself a nice big palm rat. The big rats are death on bird nests on the ground, and in nests in palmetto trees, and nest boxes in trees. Much later on October 15th, the last video, number 527, records the sound of the trail camera being broken off its mount at 3:27 to lay upside down on the forest floor for almost 2 more weeks, with heavy rain at times continuing to fall on it. I think it was either a bobcat with those heavy, strong front paws, a big raccoon using 2 front paws, or maybe this coyote just jabbing at it with his front paw, but it happened fast.
You can see the camera lenses here with the water drops and condensation inside. LCD screen inside has got water, quite a bit of water on the inside. Of course, there's still water dripping out of it here at the bottom since I took it out some time ago. So there's a lot of water in behind here. Now that I've seen the data on the SD card and I realize that the camera was in fact totally underwater, so I'm going to go ahead and pop off the face of this, and that'll facilitate drying it out. I'm going to open up and see inside if we have any obvious corrosion. And most of the water has drained out of the bottom. And you can see that, literally see that the camera lenses themselves are just totally wet. Now, this is solid state electronics, so I've had cases where by thoroughly drying these out, they've come back to life. So now you can see there's actually There's actually condensation inside the camera itself here. Both of the lenses have got condensation, and those are removable, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to go ahead and I'll dab out as much as I can with some tissue, put it out the hot sun and let it dry. There's a little bit of corrosion here on the power lead, but really I don't see a whole lot of sign of corrosion. There's some water. There's water right on the processor here. So the fact that if this works, it'll be a miracle, but it's kind of fun to see what we can do with it here. I'm not going to disassemble it any further. You can see they're really well made inside. It's really quite a lot of technology packed into these cameras. I think the first trail camera I bought was 13 years ago, and I think the camera cost like $200, and it would do very little. Let's put this out in the hot Florida sun and let it evaporate, and then we'll go from there and see what we got. But nothing better than the intense Florida sun to dry something out, and we'll let this side dry out. Now the part that concerns me is the LCD side. You know, that water may evaporate. It probably will evaporate. That way you get, when you take it out of there, it lets it evaporate, but there's so much water in there. We'll see how that works. The screen might be a little buggy, but we'll see. Okay, the camera's been out in the sun for a whole, well, at least 8 hours, and that was yesterday, and it's nice and dry today. So we're going to put it back together, and I actually have a feeling it's going to work just fine. You can see the only residual there is just a little rust stain down at the bottom, and just a little bit of corrosion at the lowest battery terminal where the water probably collected and stayed in there. If you recall, there was water inside the lenses. And sometimes when the water evaporates inside a lens, it leaves like some kind of a deposit on the inside of the lens that might impact the quality of the image. And there's a little bit of lingering cloudiness on this lens on the inside, I believe, but it doesn't seem to be right on the front of it, so we'll see. So we'll go ahead and see what kind of, I don't think that's going to affect the quality that much. And recall that there was water on the processor, the two processors. You can see this is the microphone port down here. And they went to great lengths to seal the microphone, so I don't think any water got in that way. I think the way that the water most likely filled in is because if I had it set up to a solar panel, which of course is meant to be up like this, but the camera ended up, you know, not only being completely submerged by water during Hurricane Ian, but when I looked at all the videos, I realized that the camera actually kept going before, during, and after Ian, even after the water receded. So, you know, the water from the flood of Ian really didn't get too much in the camera, more than maybe an inch or so, as far as inside. But when the camera was broken off several weeks later, then it was laying flat and upside down, and then the water could freely come right in here, and I think we got quite a bit of rain after that. So this camera has been through some amazing abuse, but it looks good. So let's, I'll just wipe the inside of the plastic here, where the lenses go. And really this TC6 has been one of my favorite new cameras, but we'll go ahead and put it back together, and I personally think it's going to work. So let's see. Okay, we'll tighten down all the screws. Okay, we've tightened down all 6 screws. Now let's put the batteries in there. A set of 8 fresh Amazon Essentials batteries. And I'm not big into buying batteries anymore. I usually solar panels, but you have to start out with 8 fresh batteries to begin with. Okay, we've got the 8 batteries in. I'm going to put the case in. You can see the rust line. We'll put that back in. LCD screen came out, which was the wettest, came out looking pretty good. So let's turn it on and see what happens. There we go. Oh, forgot to insert the SD card. My bad. So let's turn it off, but that's encouraging. Okay, let's insert the original SD card in there and turn it back on. And there we go. It fired right up. Of course, it doesn't have the correct date that's to be expected. 100% charge, looks good. Go into the menu. It looks normal, so we'll have to put it back out and test it out and see what we get. You know, judging by the way it was broken off, I think it was probably a bobcat that just went over and put a paw on it and pulled on it and snapped it off. That's one thing, that was not a Campark mount. That was another mount made of aluminum, which originally I thought aluminum was kind of cool, but when you tighten this up really tight and then weigh it down, weigh the base down, puts a lot of tensile strength on a 1/4-inch aluminum shaft, and if a bobcat just comes over and yanks on the camera outward, it just snapped right off. What I was trying to do was support it, because in the past 3 or 4 times when the raccoons come through, and they would just push it over and flatten it the other way. So this time I had it set up so that it couldn't go backwards. So we'll see how that works out and follow up with the results.
After putting the TC06 back together, I tested it out and it worked fine in all scenarios. The small dried film on the inside of the lens is far enough to the side to not degrade the images day or night. The battle-scarred camera is back in use.